This week, I continue the line of inquiry into just what enables narcissism at large in our society with Mr. Richard Grannon. Richard puts forward that codependency, or people-pleasing, is a master-slave dynamic that has been deeply entrained and entranced within us. And he puts forward that this is a bigger, more pervasive, unseen yet felt issue that's bigger than narcissism. And that if we're to crack the code of narcissism, then we need to come out bigger and wider and start to look at how we end up enabling it. We go into the dynamics and mechanics of this in depth across a variety of areas of life and a number of examples, whether it's the way the government speaks to us, the way we talk to ourselves, and also going further into consumerist capitalism and how we have been entrained over decades to buy stuff we really don't need. Through all of this, you'll really begin to understand the dynamics of codependency or people pleasing and how we've become almost conflict or awkward, emotionally adverse, and how shame and guilt has been further used as a tool to beat ourselves, and how we've become unable to say no, and thus leaving us like a bunch of infants and children wondering and questioning, when are the adults going to show up? Richard also puts forward that the way forwards is to unplug from this strange reality that we've created and start to plug into a true reality, our authentic self, starting to say no, and really dealing with legitimate suffering and collision in life. But also that the way out of this is inevitable, and not to get over agitated within ourselves and get caught up too much with the narratives that we see on social media. This is a fascinating podcast, and it was a real privilege and a treat and an honor for me to be able to speak to Richard. He's someone whose work I've been following for some time, and I'm just so impressed with the way he's able to articulate with a great sense of humor much of what I have been feeling uneasy about, and starting to be able to talk about, but not quite. And I feel sure that it will resonate with many others. I can't say it's going to be easy listening. And if you don't get triggered during it, I'll be surprised. But if you do find yourself getting triggered, no, this is not me, I'm not a conformist, then maybe X marks the spot for greater personal inquiry. Anyway, enjoy Richard. Hello, welcome back to Go Real. I'm your host, Bryn Edwards. Today I have the great pleasure of welcoming Richard Grannon onto the show. Richard, welcome.
Thank you very much for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
Indeed. Pleasure's all mine. I've been a big fan and admirer of your work for some time. So for those who are uninitiated to the world of Richard Grannon.
And it is an initiation, a painful initiation at that.
It is. A triggering initiation at times. Yeah. Purposeful, benevolent triggering. He's a psychologist, life coach through your company, Spartan Life Coach, specializing in helping people to rebuild themselves after they very much come second in an encounter with narcissists. Is that Correct. A fair summary of your work?
It is indeed, Your Honour. It is a fair summary of my misdeeds.
Indeed. So first question, because I always like to place what people do in the relevance, and so people get to know you. Why is this work particularly relevant to you yourself, Richard?
My background, I was always interested in psychology from a very, very early age. And for on and off for 15 years, I worked in the security industry doing nightclub security. And I also worked as a trainer and a self-defense instructor and a control and restraint tactics instructor, which is, as we were saying before the interview, is what led me to Perth a couple of times to teach there, nearby where you are. And so self-protection was being my life's work, is teaching people how to protect themselves. And at a certain point, I realized that with a lot of the guys and girls I was training, you know, like tactical firearms instructors, bodyguards and soldiers and tough girls and tough guys, there was this consistent theme of them being in abusive relationships. And it was so statistically high that it couldn't be coincidental. So that project was called streetfightsecrets.com. It was teaching psychology, self-defense, control and restraint tactics. But then I branched off with something called spartanlifecoach.com that was just for them. It was to help them overcome the problems in their relationships and to learn to assert themselves. So these are people who could shoot you in the head, but they can't say no in a supermarket queue if somebody pushes in front of them. So that was the focus,
really, isn't it?
It's insane, and it's the norm. It's actually that's the average, that's the norm. So if you see people who are doing something that looks very imposing from whatever, bodybuilding, powerlifting, MMA, whatever, you'll see people pleasers and codependents beneath the surface of that macho veneer.
Awesome. So one of the reasons why I really wanted to speak to you, particularly at this time, is because there's a number of things, but they all sort of seem to come together for me. There's, and you've already started to mention it there, people pleasers and codependents in particular. But, you know, as a couple of weeks ago, I ended up speaking to Professor Sam Wagner, who you've done videos and work with.
I have. Have you recovered?
It took me a couple of days to process it.
It does take, I've told Sam this, I've said to him, like, sometimes when I'm talking to you, it takes about 2 or 3 days to recover from what you've said.
It does. Do you know, without seeming a little bit up myself, I actually patted myself on the back the next day for staying in the conversation for 2 hours.
Yeah.
So
you did very well. You did very, very well. I watched the whole thing. I watched it very closely. I listened very carefully, and you did well.
Thank you.
It is, but it's, you know, Sam will really take you on a journey, and he pulls no punches.
Yeah, and I think we're doing round 2 in a couple of months.
So God have mercy on your soul.
Indeed. But one of the most interesting things, I got a lot of response, and I got a lot of messages, but one of the interesting things I started to see was this whole, yes, that is the nasty narcissist, and that is that person over there, and they are just evil, and I am good, and they just came in and preyed upon me. And it just strikes me that there's a bigger issue at play. There's almost a flip side to this narcissism, which is very much around this urge to people please and be codependent. You know, why do we willingly let these people into our lives and do the things that they do? And so I wondered if, just to start with, you know, so we can start at the micro level so we can build it out to a bigger macro level. Can you run me through what is people pleasing? What are the mechanics and dynamics? How does it come about, and how does it play out?
Yeah. Just to close the loop on Sam for a second there, the recurrent theme that I've had speaking to Sam over the years goes back to the first time I interviewed him in 2014. There's a YouTube video called Narcissophobia. And we were talking about the very close relationship between codependents and the victims of narcissistic abuse, the prey and the predator, and this strong desire to disavow and to deny any sort of responsibility and wrongdoing. And I think one of the very challenging things, and Sam comes back to this frequently, it's a recurrent theme, and I've come back to it in the last sort of 6 weeks or so, is in order to crack the code on codependency, we really have to look at all of what that means. And we are not at the polar opposite end of a spectrum to narcissists as codependents. We are more a mirror image, a symmetrical mirror image to narcissists. Right. So as I sort of put forward what codependency is, I want people to understand my stance is that actually we've we're raised in a very similar environment, probably the same environment as the NPD. It's just our response to it is different. So codependency, people pleaser syndrome, a pronounced fawn response, to use the CPTSD terminology,
Yes.
would be as a result of being raised in an abusive environment. If you acquire it in adulthood, which is rare, it must be an environment where you feel you cannot escape or you effectively cannot escape. So an abusive relationship can do this, but you must be living with the person. Being stuck in a prison, being stuck in an institution, being stuck in boarding school, as we both were, both of these can do this. Boarding school effectively entrains codependency, as does the military. And we can thank the French and the Brits. We can thank our ancestors for that. This is a very deliberate process. That's why the infantry is called the infantry, because their purpose is to infantilize the soldiers and to treat them as children. The infantry were always frontline cannon fodder. I didn't find this out until years after I applied to the army. I wanted to join wanted to join the parachute regiment. Yeah. And I realized years later that actually that was an extension of my abusive childhood environment, and then boarding school, and then my private school education, all of which is there to break the child's spirit and to make you codependent on higher authority. It's extremely cruel and very overt. I mean, there isn't really much effort to hide it, because they don't need to hide it, because who are they going to get in trouble with? Nobody's going to tell them off. So you end up, codependency is a kind of trauma bonding into a master-slave dynamic. So if your parents told you to shut up and do as you were told as a child, you will develop a slave-like mentality, and you will seek masters for the rest of your life. This is why the Special Air Services proudly call themselves pilgrims. You know, they're pilgrims seeking a master. It's based on a poem. And I've discussed this with Special Forces guys. I'm like, do you realize the brainwashing? And they're like, yep, yep. PTSD in combat veterans now is so high, not because of the violence they've experienced, I claim, but because so many combat veterans are waking up to just how cruel procedure they've been through, and just how much deception they've been at the receiving end of. So that's a way of entraining codependency.
Yes. And so how does it actually play out in an everyday scenario as a grown adult?
It will not. It's rare that a codependent person is codependent all the time. So there will be particular contexts and particular people with whom we are codependent. So there are trigger contexts and trigger figures, authority figures, typically. How that plays out is a neurotic desire to avoid any and all conflict, not conflict perceived in the other, but conflict perceived subjectively. So we become hyper agreeable. We say yes to things that we should not be saying yes to. No becomes a verboten haram word. It's like no's not on the table. Whatever they say, I'm going to do it. And then we hyper vigilantly and proactively seek for ways to serve, because it's not enough that we're slaves. We want to be super slaves. We want to be the best slave that master has ever had.
Yes. And we wear our hard work as a badge of honor.
Exactly. Yeah.
So you've got these people who are, how prevalent would you say this is in society nowadays?
Oh, I think it's a much bigger problem than narcissism. I agree with Sam that narcissism has become an organizing principle of modern culture. And it's, you know, to the extent that people really, the majority of humans in Western culture can only relate to each other narcissistically. We are kind of facing like a zombie apocalypse of narcissism. But the broader problem, I think, is actually if everybody in a society is a narcissist, nobody's a narcissist. Yeah. So Sam frequently uses the example of Nazi Germany. And I'm like, yes, Nazi Germany, but imagine being on the inside of Nazi Germany. narcissistic psychopathy doesn't exist. You're just a good Nazi. You're not a narcissistic. You're not sick. You're only sick if you show empathy. You're only sick if you don't violently believe in courageously dominating the lands around Europe and killing everybody. Then you're sick. You're the sick one. So the situation we face now is narcissism is still a relevant term because I do think there's still a minority. NPD is still a minority. So then the majority is codependent. Well, then how does narcissism play out? Narcissism can only play out if there is a minority exploiter and a majority exploited. Yes. So if we're all refusing to say no, and we've all abrogated because codependency is an addiction, it becomes addictive. We become addicted to abrogating the responsibility of our own authenticity and abrogating the responsibility of our adulthood. So if you are looking around, as many of us are, we look at our politicians, we look at our systems of governance, we look at the corporations, and where are the fucking adults? Who's in charge here?
Oh,
yeah.
Yes.
Right. So many people have made the mistake, I think, of saying that's narcissism. They've all fallen prey to narcissism. That's part of the puzzle. The bigger piece of the puzzle is no, they've fallen prey to codependency because we're all now entrained to abrogate our responsibility as adults. It's much easier in a certain sense to live as a slave. A slave doesn't make choices. A slave doesn't have the burden of responsibility. A slave doesn't have the stress of agency and regret, because whilst we're capable of regret, it's not our fault. Nothing is our fault. So this is where you get the problem that you saw, which is I'm a martyr, I'm blameless. Oh, the narcissist this, the narcissist that. And you just look at people and you go, really? You had no say in this. You didn't make a pact with the devil. You didn't trade anything. You got no benefit whatsoever from this relationship. Not me. And I'm like, come on now. Let's be fucking...
Have a word with yourself.
Have a word with yourself. Let's not abrogate this responsibility to be adults. It's hard to be an adult. And we live in an infantilizing environment that wants us all to be useful idiots. What I think has happened, though, as so often happens in human endeavor, is the machine takes over. So we build machines to serve us, yes, and then we ultimately end up serving the machine, yes, which I suspect was in 2001 Space Odyssey, the Stanley Kubrick movie. I think that was what the monolith actually is. People said it's technology. It is technology, but I think the warning there is whatever we build, it becomes infused with our unconscious drives. And once it's externalized and infused with unconscious drives, it pulls darkness out of us, and it actually doesn't lead anywhere good. So I think what happened here is a group of people, conspiracy time, people with money, people who are running PR campaigns, people who were the captains of industry. I think it was financial. I don't think it's anything spookier than just financial gains. People who would hire men like Freud's grandson, Edward Bernays, and say, how do we make people buy more? How do we make them obey? They formed this wonderful, effective ideology and a machine. But those men died, and the machine kept running, and it kept growing. And brainwashing people to feed the beast just became that's what we do. That's what everybody does. Yeah. And so when I say unconscious here, I'm not really so much talking about the Freudian and the Jungian unconscious where the drives go in the cellar and then they pop back out. What I'm talking about is a thing that is not conscious but exists. It has impact, but we're not aware of it. And the closest word I think that really exists for it is ideology, but it's not quite right because it has gravity. It has, it's like a wave. It has a weight and it's moving in a direction. And I think that's where we are now. The other thing, the unconscious, the beast, the machine that we built is now dragging us in a direction we really don't want to go. And I'm not sure anybody's running it. I don't think there's a few men at the top of that wearing cloaks, cackling and going, ha ha ha, we've finally dominated humanity. I think there's a few people who are riding the wave who might think that they're in control of it, but it's too big now. It's so huge, that wave, that I don't think anybody can really control it.
That kind of, for want of a better phrase, shits on any idea that there's like this small elite running the world. And
I mean, we can point to it, can't we? Because, you know, if you're on social media, you'll have seen the meme going around of just how much Mark Zuckerberg, Gates, Bezos made just in the last 4 months as a result of this situation that we're in.
Yeah.
And people jump to the conclusion, well, that means cum hoc ergo propter hoc, with this, therefore, because of this, they did it. It's cui bono. They must have. And I'm tempted by that, but then I think, I don't think anybody's in charge of this. I think they're just riding the wave. I think they're surfing the wave. I think they're bright guys, but they're not. Yeah, I don't think there's a secret cabal that's making this happen. I think there was.
Convenient for them to be.
Say again.
It's convenient for them to be, for all the same reasons that I had with the, oh, there's narcissists and they're all naughty and I'm all good.
Right, which, yes, again, abrogation of responsibility. Who, you know, you get fat and you sue McDonald's. Well, was McDonald's coming around to your house, putting a gun to your face and saying, eat this, you know, high calorie, low nutrition food? No, but they made it delicious and tasty. So whose fault is that? You know, and who's making me spend 5 hours on Instagram a day? Nobody's forcing me to do that.
Yeah.
So like you say, yes, it's easier to say, oh, they did this. And I think that's a codependent response, because if you're codependent, you're the ultimate victim. If you're a slave and you're born into slavery, it's like, it's not my fault. And then you get that sort of archetype of the conspiracy theorist who's unemployed, who just plays video games, smokes weed all day. And you go, why don't you do something with your life? And they go, well, you know, then I'd be serving the man. And it's like, no, actually, you're just fucking lazy. You're using this as an excuse. It's a post hoc excuse for what you already want to do. So I do think, again, yes, you're right, that sort of like pointing at people and going, it's them, it's their fault. It's the same as the codependents or the victims of narcissistic abuse saying the narcissist did it to me. Well, where's your responsibility? Like, are you saying no? Are you refusing to go along with it? Or do you just trog along with it? What are you really, you know, what about you? And there's a bit of a fight here. And it's a really good way of provoking people online, is you push their responsibility back onto them. And you go, no, actually, this is your responsibility. It's a great way of losing subscribers and starting online fights, I can assure you.
Which I'm sure amuses you.
Every couple of months. I'm like, hey, guys, responsibility, take over your life.
I'm getting far too many subscribers. I need to get that down again. How did we get to this place where I love the phrase, there just seems to be no adults left? I mean, I'm 45 years old, and you know, for a long time during my 20s and 30s, I still sort of felt like a boy, for want of a better phrase, still trying to figuring things out. And then all of a sudden recently, in the last 2 or 3 years, possibly through doing the podcast, possibly because, you know, understanding, you know, like Jung's work more, that I'm going through that second phase of individuation, and I'm going from the morning of life and I'm sort of leaving the lunchtime and entering the afternoon of life. I'm doing it gracefully rather than kicking and screaming.
I hope you have a pleasant afternoon.
Indeed, I'm going to have a snooze first. But it just struck me recently. It's like, from time to time, I look around and go, you know, I do have a pre-digital memory. It's like when are the grown-ups going to show up and actually say this? Everything that's going on is fucking barking. Yeah. And then all of a sudden recently, I've looked around and looked inside and felt, shit, I think I'm the grown-up now.
Right.
And it feels kind of lonely.
Yeah. Yeah. It's frightening. It's frightening. It's the moment of realization that nobody's coming to save me. Nobody's coming to save us. I may be the most competent person in the room right now. And I know I'm a fucking idiot. I know, because I live with myself 24/7.
That's exactly it. You know, and you know, we've all been sucked in by you know, delivering. You know, we all have a need to know, because then it gives us control. And then, you know, sales and marketing have preyed upon that and sold us predictable outcomes, you know, do the 6-week course and then you'll get the abs, or, you know, come and do my mindset coaching course and then you'll be from here to here. But it just doesn't work like that.
No.
And now it's like, who's going to fucking say something?
Which is a great question, along with how did we get here, which is that, you know, it's a kind of like, I turn people off with this because I say it's consumer capitalism. I'm not a communist. I believe in free trade and competition and red-blooded. I think selling is a great thing to do. I think developing a product and selling it is a good thing for a human being to do. I think it's a worthy activity if it's done righteously. Well, the majority of it isn't done righteously. And marketing and sales and PR and media, I mean, my God, what a fucking cesspit all these fields have become. Media is just awful. It's got to the point now where I blanket refuse requests from any mainstream media outlet because I've had such bad experiences with them. Once with Radio 4, they gave me a fair shake, and the guy was cool, but he had his own independent thing, and then he made it, and then he'd sell it to Radio 4. But other than that, awful scumbags, total narcissistic, psychopathic scum, and they're ranking highly in the media. So people come to me and they go, "Oh, this was written in the papers," and I'm like, "You've no idea what's behind the scenes there. These are not good humans, and these are not lovers of humanity." The people that I met who were producers and moderately high ranking in mainstream media in the UK and in America loathe people. They loathe humans. They think humans are scum. They think that we're idiots and that our only purpose is to be treated as cattle, which is why the media looks like it does.
Yes.
Because the people who are running it, they're not kind. They're not, their impetus is not, how do we educate and how do we bring dignity back to humanity and no, they're like, how do we make people angry, scared and frightened today? Because anger, fear will induce obedience. And it's just, the mainstream media is just the slave master's whip cracking you across the mind and the emotions every day. That's all it's there for. That's all it's there for. It's for nothing else but deception and fear and the inducement of obedience. So I would say to people watching this, be very, very careful what you let inside of your brain as far as the mainstream media goes. But to the broader question of what brought us here, when I'm talking about consumer capitalism, I'm talking about not fair trade in the marketplace. I have fine carrots here. Please come and buy them at a reasonable price. Yes. I'm talking about object fetishism. I'm talking about a deliberate and conscious, decades-long effort to convince people to buy things that they don't need. I'm talking about a deliberate, decades-long effort to take money back from people. I think we live inside of a slave plantation. I think for you and I and everybody listening, we're all slaves. We live in a feudal society. We're peasants. We don't have money. It's an illusion. We have beads. We're allowed to trade inside the plantation, our little bit of beads, and they keep taking it back. They pay you and then they take it back. They take it back on your fuel. They take it back on your clothes. They take it back on your rent. Everything we do is taxed. We can't fart without being taxed. So they go, here you go, slave. I've paid you. Here's your beads. Go drinking because it's massively taxed. Go and smoke. It's massively taxed. Go and do that. It's all tax. It's all taxed back. And I think it's just to give us the illusion of freedom. We're just slaves in a plantation telling ourselves that we're free. And they figured this out. I can't remember the author's name now. They figured this out centuries ago. They were like, it's actually cheaper to have the slaves police each other and doctor each other and rent to each other than it is for us to look after them. This was written, by the way, I think it's Adam Smith who wrote it, but he wrote it. It was back in the 1700s. He wrote it. It's cheaper to have the slaves take care of themselves than for us to look after them.
Yeah, yeah. And now we seem to have, I hate using the word weaponize, but now we seem to have this use of shame and guilt, particularly at the moment. It's like, you know, be good boys and girls and do the right thing and stay inside. And then all of a sudden we see other people who have not done the right thing. And now we're starting to grass on people and it seems like we're using shame and guilt as well now as a really big tool.
Absolutely. These are the most powerful tools an adult can leverage against a child. The stick of shame and the whip of guilt, because, you know, I could beat you up every time you do something wrong, but beating you tires my beating arm. My whip hand gets calluses. I get tired of that. But if I can train you to beat yourself up for doing wrong, there you go. That's the slave mastering itself. And I think that's the trick that's being played. That's why we're being spoken to like children. That's why guilt and shame is being used so much now. To me, it feels like there's a desperate air to this. I think they think we're in the final phases of a control system that's on the verge of collapse. I don't think you can keep doing this to people and think that they're just going to go along with it forever. You know, I know the type of thing you're talking about. I can't think of anything off the top of my head, but I've seen adverts around the UK and around Europe. We're in this together. Do the right thing. Be nice. Do as you're told, because it's the nice thing to do. And if you don't, you're not nice. I'm like, I don't remember signing up to being nice. What's being nice for? Why should I be nice? That's codependency. Being nice and being the best slave you can becomes a virtue. Not to sound like Nietzsche, but this is what Nietzsche was complaining about. These things are not virtues. Obedience isn't a virtue. Humility isn't a virtue. Not really. Supplicating to another person and being the best slave you can. These are not virtues. He called it a slave morality. He said, this is a slave morality. It's not a real moral system. It's not a system of virtues and values. It's an artificial system of virtues and values to keep you in your slave state and telling yourself, no, I'm a good person. Why? Because I kiss the master's arse better than anyone else can.
Whoop-de-doo. Recently, I've also been sort of diving in, as I said, mentioned earlier, I'm diving into more of the work of Jung, and can you see the bigger psyche sort of getting to a point where it goes, all right, kids, I've left your conscious brain in charge for a while and it's not doing the thing. I'm going to come in and sort some of this out. And this is sort of internally, collectively, because, you know, one of the things that I find is as we get to that latter 30s, 40s stage, early 40s stage, we get to almost like the apex of the individual power. And all of a sudden, everything you've tried to be and not be, then everything sort of catches up with you and you plunge back into your shadow. But it strikes me that many of the things that have helped us collectively hold our identity from an external point of view, latching on to structures, even there, like the control you're saying, they're starting to fall to pieces. And so it strikes me that there's almost an inevitability of the collapse, but then it's the faith of having a rise of something bigger, the human spirit within us. Do you see where I'm going with that?
Yeah, I do. I think that if you keep pushing people and you keep torturing people psychologically, eventually they will become exhausted and they will collapse. And we're seeing that. The suicide rates are through the roof, like anxiety, depression, alcohol abuse, drug abuse is through the roof. But, and I'm not a naive idealist here. I'm really not.
No, and this question wasn't for me to try and cling on to a little bit of hope.
Yeah, no. I think in the most real, authentic, existentialist, nihilistic way, there will be a spiritual awakening. But for people listening, please take away all New Age overtones from that. Spiritual awakening in this context would mean, or let's say a psychological awakening, more in a Jungian sense, that we are worshipping fetishes. We are worshipping false gods.
Mm.
That in a certain sense, our adolescence is over, that there is no heaven, there is no hell, there are no angels, there are no demons, there's no God, there's no devil. There is this, and that is all that there is. And I'm not trying to take people's faith away from them. When I talk about angels, demons, heaven and hell, I mean ideologically. I mean, we are trapped in a story that is, Richard is born and he has his birth certificate number, his national insurance number, his passport number. And then he's this thing that goes through life, that consumes, that took holidays, that bought a house. Was it a big house? Was it a little house? How hard did he work? Did he have a degree? Do you know what I'm saying? And it's all viewed through the capitalist lens. Capital means stuff, folks. It's not complicated. They're trying to make it capital means stuff. So if you're a capitalist, you're a stuffist. If you watch The Walking Dead, it became a meme. Whenever Rick said, "Get your stuff and your things," that was your capital. So if you're in the zombie apocalypse and you're in a shotgun and a backpack with beans in, that's your capital. When he confronts Negan's saying, "Give me half your shit." So that's capitalism meets tyrannical communism. Give me or die. Give me or be tortured. It's really simple. So when we're viewing through a capitalist lens, we're viewing through a materialist lens. We're saying this stuff that I can hold in my hand matters. This is what matters. And I think the hard psychological awakening will be no, it doesn't. Never did. The story doesn't matter. The stuff doesn't matter. None of that matters. But like all spiritual awakenings, like all psychological awakenings, it will be painful. There will be a mighty scream, and there will be a scarring and a tattooing. You know, in all initiation ceremonies across the globe, you're supposed to get initiated about 13 years old. So here's me and you in our 40s going, "Oh, I kind of feel like I might be starting to be a man now." That was supposed to have taken place a very long time ago, but this is where we're at. So what will be the scarring? The scarring will be when the kids have all their toys taken away from them, which is on the horizon. A lot of our toys will be taken away from us. A lot of the things that we're very attached to, a lot of the things that we think are important will be taken away. And then we'll go through a process of reduction where we'll be asked, well, what is actually important? What is good? We're so brainwashed, we don't know what is good. We're such twitching, brainwashed, poisoned, little wretched golem addict creatures. We have no idea what's good. Well, when it's all gone, then you'll see. The sun is good. Going to sleep is good. Being with other humans is good. Was anything ever better than that? No. Oh, I loved my PlayStation. I loved my Instagram. No, it was horseshit. It was just mental illness. You were tricked. You were entrained to feel that way. I'm pretty extreme on this stuff. I believe that Santa Claus and Christmas is a way of trauma bonding people to object fetishism from an early age, because I remember not giving a fuck. I remember being utterly bewildered by Christmas. I was like, what are we doing? We're exchanging presents. Don't you love presents? And I was like, not really. I like it when you fuckers aren't screaming at each other all the time and terrifying me. That's fun. I like it when you're not hitting me. That's fun. And then it was all this weird stuff with like the highly colorful wrapping and the colors on the tree. And I was like, and the weird music, and then this strange figure that comes through the chimney and visits the I was like, this is some creepy horseshit. What are you people doing? Just be normal. What is all this? Why are we exchanging gifts? Why is my family staring at me when I open a present and I open it and it's like, I don't know, a fucking toy gun? Everybody goes, ooh. I remember going, this is a weird ritual. You guys are freaks, man. This is some strange ceremony we're doing. But eventually it got to me, and eventually I was entrained into it, and I wanted the things. But I also remember thinking, I'm wanting this and it doesn't feel good. It's agitated. I want the new Action Man figure. I want the new Star Wars. I used to collect Star Wars figures. And I remember losing my Boba Fett, and I was really upset, and I wanted a new one. but I wanted it in this weird, anxious, envious, like I was angry about it and I was obsessed with it. I remember thinking, even as a kid, I must have been, maybe I was 5 or 6. I was like, this is weird. I don't feel this way about anything else. There's nothing else. So I think we're entrained into object fetishism. And now we are very sick. All of us are very sick, but it's breaking because the baubles won't work anymore. Humans don't work like that. You can't use the same stimulation and get the same response all the time. Humans adapt. They're very flexible. There's a huge amount of neuroplasticity. And now I think we've adapted and we're like, yeah, this ain't it. This isn't it anymore.
Shit. Yeah, because one of the things that bamboozles me currently is this complete dissonance and incongruity between actually accepting the true nature of man, that he can be rational, but he can also be highly emotive, highly impetuous. And we are seeing this right now here in Australia with, you know, very strict border controls because of COVID and this, that, and the other. But then all of a sudden you found out that 2 girls snuck across because they wanted to come to have a party, or you lock a load of people up in a hotel for 14 days. And guess what? They start shagging the security guards, you know, and it's all like, oh, you know, and yes, we've discussed using the rod and fail of shame and guilt, but underneath it, the thing that I keep asking myself and others around me is, are you fucking surprised? Really?
Yeah,
are you really surprised?
No, they're not. It's a setup. It's a total setup. It's a total setup. What the next phase will be, and I shot something for David Icke's website, Iconic, in March when this happened, and we've got it on video. I said it of Boris Johnson 4 months ago. Just wait. When the second spike comes, and it will come, we will be told it's all our fault. And he will use, I said of Boris Johnson, against the British people, but it'll be every authority figure across the globe. They'll be like, yes, you're going into another lockdown, you fucks, but that's because you won't stop shagging each other. That's because you won't stop partying. That's because you won't stop drinking. And I'm like, well, of course young people want to meet up and party in illegal raves. You've just told them to stay in their house for 4 months for something that, to all intents and purposes, doesn't seem all that threatening if you're fit and healthy and young. Why should they forego, like 4 months when you're 18 is a fucking eternity.
Yes.
That's their youth. I'm not saying it's right or wrong. I'm saying I understand.
It just is.
It is what it is. I would be doing it. 100% I would be doing it. I'd probably shag more just out of defiance.
Great way to defy. But I guess it's just this. I'm just finding it incredulous at the moment that there's such a disparity between people's view and then being caught up in this shame and guilt of, oh, I should never have done it. And it just sometimes, because I end up thinking about things potentially more deeply, I find myself to use the Greek myth of like Cassandra, who can see things into the future, not like miles away, but just small things happening. Yet, while she was given the gift of being able to see things into the future, she was also cursed with nobody listening to her or taking her seriously. And so now it can be, it can be existentially troubling, even from that level.
Yes, because I think that what you can detect here is you can see a movement towards anti-humanism, which is, what do humans want to do? Well, happy little humans, healthy little humans like to get together and dance and drink and have a bacchanalian festival and then fuck each other. God bless them. That's why we're here. Like, because we've been doing that for millennia. If that stops, we're all metaphorically fucked, but physically unfucked. And it reminds me of 1984. O'Brien, when he's torturing Winston, it's not often quoted. It's a really weird line. He says to Winston when he's torturing him, "We will abolish the orgasm. We will abolish the orgasm. You will meet once a year in a dour ceremony in misery and be forced to have sex just to replenish the numbers. That's it. But there'll be no love, there'll be no joy, and we will abolish the orgasm. So I'm watching them and I'm going, okay, I see how this is. Because we were told in the UK, you can't meet up and hook up. You can't go to somebody else's house and hook up. If you're already with them and you're in the same house, you're okay, but you can't go somewhere else and hook up. And I was like, all right, I'm not saying that they're trying to abolish orgasms yet, but that could be the seed. That could be something that, you know, when we're on year 3 or year 5 of this horse shit, that's what they're saying to people. We need to track you. You can hook up, but you need to tell the government who you're fucking. It's your social responsibility. How sexy will that be? Fill out this form and then we can have sex.
Yeah. It takes eHarmony to a new place, doesn't it?
Yeah.
And there's also for me that now our inability to deal with any suffering. You were sort of mentioning this, went close to this earlier on. It just strikes me that we become so bloody precious and so enslaved that we've, you know, Jung himself says, you know, neurosis is the drive to avoid all suffering, and yet there is legitimate suffering. There is an appropriate level of suffering. Suffering is part of life. Again, let's come back to the truisms of life. People meet, tough and shag. There's also suffering. So how do we actually deal and process with that rather than?
Yeah, it's I think Sam has touched on this a few times. You know, it's a kind of somatic narcissism, body-focused narcissism that obviously results in hypochondria, which is I should be young and beautiful forever. No. I should never have any illness. No. And I should never die. Are you mental? We're all going to die. But this is the culture we live in. It's this frozen, infantile, narcissistic veneer that is like California. It started in California and then it just spread across the world. It's infected the world, where youth and sexiness is the only thing of value. Well, hang on a second. Like, the people who give us our antibiotics, the people who give us our medical procedures, the people who give us the TVs we watch, you know, we can't have this shift to, we can't afford to have a shift to only that which is instantly visually pleasing has value. We really are screwed at that point. And look at what's happening with plastic surgery right now. It's never been more popular. It's an exploding industry, plastic surgery. The earth is plunging into tyranny and people are getting their tits and their lips done in numbers never before seen.
Scary.
And so the bus went off the side of the cliff, but everybody looked great. We'll all be selfieing on the way down. Falling off the cliff, hashtag lol, YOLO.
Yeah. When I'm in the casket, can you just do
the perfect selfie at last?
There you go. What is the way out of this, Richard? Big question.
At the risk of trying to, like, you know, bluff my way into sounding enlightened, I think the way out is inevitable. I think the way out is inevitable. We maybe don't need to agitate ourselves too much on the way out. It's going to be what it's going to be. If we're too engaged with the narrative and the story and not engaged enough in our actual reality, because it's raining outside, there are seagulls, the tide's coming in, none of these things give a fuck. Not a single fuck about anything that we're discussing here. The seagulls don't care, the dogs don't care, the waves don't care, the mountains of Wales across the way, they don't care. They won't change. They won't be altered by this at all. They will never experience any effect of this. And it's good to connect with that. It's good to connect with the timeless. It's good to connect with, that's why I advise people to connect with nature, because it almost literally plugs us into the infinite. The trees aren't infinite, but they've been there for a long fucking time. If you listen to the wind in the trees, that sound was being made a long time before humans were here. And they'll be still making that noise a long time after we're all gone. So connecting with the timeless, connecting with the infinite, it's very important. The narrative, the news, the story, the Instagram, the Facebook, the YouTube, this is the stuff that will drive you crazy. This is where the infection lies. Go be with your friends if you're allowed. Go be in nature and return to reality. This is not reality. This is a fever dream. This is somebody else's fever dream. It possibly is Bill Gates' wank fantasy to inject his jizz into his vaccination into everyone because he's a crapulent little psychopathic turd. But that's his fantasy. It's not mine. And I don't have to consent to living inside of the fantasy. And if it gets to the point where we say, okay, you're either vaccinated and part of the technocracy or you're not, and you can piss off, I would say, okay, well, I guess I'm gonna have to learn how to farm then, aren't I? I guess, whatever it is, there's an inevitability to all this. So I'm not saying to people do nothing. I'm not saying don't be vigilant. I'm saying don't drive yourself crazy. Like if you're on the internet for more than 5 or 6 hours a day, stop. If you're watching TV for more than 5 or 6 hours a day, stop. It's real, but it's not the ultimate reality. Yes. All of this will pass. All of these governments, all of these people, they're going to die. We're all going to die. We'll all be dust. It's okay. So when we were talking about a spiritual awakening before, a psychological awakening, I think it's very healthy to come back to little bits, as much as you can tolerate, existential nihilism. Which is Eckhart Tolle wrote a book called One Day Even the Sun Will Die. This is good. Remember, nobody, like my great grandchildren will not know my name. That nobody will know my name inside of a very short period of time, relatively. It matters, but it doesn't matter that much. Part of the problem we have is we're so hypersensitive, we're so non-resilient, we're so self-obsessed and so narcissistic. We're whipping ourselves up into a frenzy over this,
and codependent with all of that.
Absolutely. It's a totally codependent response because we're relying on the other. Codependency is essentially a parasitic relationship. If I could say it like this, codependency is a relationship in which I make myself invisible, my needs are invisible, and I parasitically attach to somebody or something that is visible. So we're all entrained into codependency. That takes place in a dyad between two people. And we're all codependent with our media, our social media, and our governments and our nations now. It's a codependent relationship. So free yourself from the codependency. Recover from the codependency. But it's hard. It means being an adult. It means being visible. It means being authentic. It means being present. It means not constantly sifting everything you do and say through what reactions will I get from people? Will I get more likes? Will I get more followers? No, fuck it. Just be you. Whatever you think is the thing, then go do the thing. And if people don't like it, then do it on your own. Just be a crazy magus walking through the world with your familiar and your spells. You'll be all right.
And also use a well underused word, which is no, from time to time.
We can say no. We can say no. And we can say no to all kinds of things. That phrase, usually people interpret it as saying no to authority. For a codependent, we need to learn to say no to us first.
Yes.
It's an addiction. So the impulse to feed the addiction to delete yourself, delete your authenticity, delete your identity will rise up. And you have to find the strength to say, no, I'm not deleting who I am to avoid conflict. It's all about conflict avoidance, really, and being hyper agreeable. You say, no, I won't avoid conflict here. I'll let conflict come. I'll let it come and I'll see what it is. And whatever happens, I'll do my best to cope with it. That's all an adult human can do. That's what we've been doing for millennia. That's what we've always done. We didn't shy away from pain. We didn't shy away from being visible. We would be considered in any normal human tribal community up until now, like the last 100 years, and then you've got the rest of humanity. anywhere in the globe, we would appear as total freaks, total weirdos in any tribe. You go Japan, Okinawa, Africa, drop us anywhere in time. They'd be like, what the fuck is wrong with you? Why are you like that? Why are you so twitchy? Why are you so weird? And they would probably see us as ill, and they'd probably call the shaman over and be like, get the spirits out of this one. He's not feeling too well.
He needs a good dust down.
Yeah.
I know. I mean, particularly that, you know, we all collide in life, and that's okay. But to avoid even the mildest of collisions, and going back to what you were saying earlier on, to work with people who could 1 minute shoot someone in their head, but then the next minute get all worked up about saying no in a supermarket. I mean, right there.
Yeah, that's the modern state. I think that's the modern state of broad scale codependency that I claim is the bigger problem than narcissism. Is you can do awful things if it's not you doing it. So if I give you a badge and I give you a motto and I give you a mission, you'll do pretty much anything, pretty much everything.
As proved by the Nazis in World War II.
Proved by the Nazis in World War II, and it's been proven every time, you know, people go to the cinema. It's proven every time people make an order on Amazon. It's proven. I used to be big into MK Ultra and the CIA and Manchurian candidates, which is a process whereby you brainwash people in order to make them assassins, and then afterwards they don't remember it. So even if they're captured and tortured, they wouldn't be able to give away any information. And I was so into it that I actually approached different American government agencies, and most of them told me to piss off. But I actually ended up approaching the Anthony Robbins Foundation because I heard he'd worked on Project Jedi. And I called, this was 1996, I called on a payphone and I said, hello, I'm a psychology student. I want to know more about Mr. Robbins's work at Project Jedi. And some nice secretary of his just sent me a copy of the Army and Intelligence Service issued manual for Project Jedi. She photocopied it, coffee stains and all, and just sent it to me in England. I still have it. And I read it and I was like, oh, this is so woefully naive and incompetent. And I realized it's a total waste of time. You don't need to brainwash people to turn them into assassins or genocide committers, or just tell them they're important. Just tell them they're doing their national duty. Just feed into their ego and their narcissism. They'll do whatever you want. Not everybody will, but if you take a population of 100 people and interview them, we'll find 3 or 4 who would do awful things without brainwashing. Humans don't need brainwashing. We don't need hypnosis, just to have significance, just to have a sense of mission and purpose, and a sense of having a place in history. Yeah.
And I think anybody who would disagree with us, I would suggest they go and look at the Solomon Ash experiment, which is so simple, of having a number of people in a room who all say that one line's shorter than the other and is blatantly wrong, and then the last person sits there and goes with the crowd.
So this is where we're really up to now, and this is very, it's a, I'm trying not to use the word triggering. I'll just say triggering. It's a provocative subject. People don't realize how highly conformist they are and how highly conformist we've become. We posture. And we say, well, on the Myers-Briggs, I'm an INF diddly-dee, and because I'm a Pisces, I'm like, you're not really anything, my mate. You're what your tribe says you are. I'm no different. I am what my tribe says I am. And yes, you have free will, and yes, you have responsibility, but don't take the piss. Like you're not, to me, this is, again, it's consumer capitalism. Everything is a thing and it's capital, including me. And so we set up our own consumer profiles for them. This is me. I vote this way. This is how I feel about this issue, that, and my favorite ice cream is pistachio. And I'm like, inside of 2 months, I could turn you upside down. It would be illegal, and I'd have to feed you psychedelics. But inside of 2 months, I could turn you into a completely different person. It's not hard. It's not that hard to do. So my point with saying this is, part of our codependency is pretending that we have more agency than we really do. And we need to have a proper view of, who am I really? Why do I vote this way? Why did I take that job? Why do I tell this story about who I am? You know, people say, oh, I chose to be a doctor. I'm like, no, you didn't. No child of 10 years old chooses to. You were pressured into it. You were pressured into it by your tribe. Or I chose to be a lawyer. No, you didn't. Do it. Well done. I'm not taking anything away from you, but don't feed yourself this bullshit narrative that it's your choice. It's not. These things are not our choices. So again, this is back to, if there is going to be a psychological awakening, the useful elements of existential nihilism will be to embrace the fact that we aren't as much as we think we are. And in another sense, we're far more than we think we are, far, far more, and have far more power. But the power begins, as you just said, in saying, no, I'm not going to do it this way. I'm not going to show up as this avatar personality of myself. I'm going to show up as me. And this is what I really want. This is what I really like. This is what I'm really about. This is actually my true identity. And then you have to have the courage to be rejected for that or punished for that, which is not easy. It's not easy.
And you're going to get rejected for it.
Absolutely.
Particularly by those nearest and dearest to you, or large swathes of followers who have thought you're one thing and then you become another. And we don't like unpredictability, least of all the people around that we're in relationship with.
Well, I mean, the social media is almost like codependency writ large. So if a person on social media changes and you see the response of the followers, you see codependency and narcissism writ large. They become very upset. And it's this tribal drive to make other monkeys in the troop conform. Don't do things differently. It makes me anxious, is what they're really saying. You're triggering me into abandonment anxiety. You're reminding me of my failings. You're making me feel insecure. So as you're climbing, they'll try and drag you down, because that's their issue. They've not dealt with, they're not individuated. So I need you to be you just as you are, because you're an object, you're a thing, you're part of my capital. And I need you to do this for me. You move, you change. It's very frightening.
That's going to trigger my nervous system, and I don't like that.
Right.
And it starts right back
my own emotions.
Yeah. And it, kind of starts right when we're kids, and you go up that really big climbing frame and mum looks at it and goes, oh, there's my precious child. Come down. It's scary. So I was having the time of my life, but now I'm conditioned to, oh, it's scary. It's scary. It's scary. And I've been playing for the last, I was very kindly introduced to a simple technique of trauma release tremoring. So bringing on involuntary tremors into a body just to release and flush out like almost the physical knots of trauma and stuff in my body over the last year. And I thought there's got to be something in this. So I continued. And then after a period of time, I found my own nervous system down-regulated. And then I could feel other people. Yeah. And then it becomes kind of triggering when you sit there in a board meeting or something and people say, I really need you to do this. And you go, I'm not going to do it. Because it's your nervous system that wants me to do it, not a rational idea. Yeah.
Yeah. It's one thing I would say to people, like with your experience there, which is it's a process that's led you to come out of codependency. So codependence, like a narcissist codependent relationship or a master slave relationship, depends on you not being able to process your emotions properly. So because you're trying to avoid guilt and avoid shame, you're constantly dodging. You'll just do as you're told so that you don't trip that mine in the minefield. Once you've got past that and you don't mind feeling guilt, you don't mind feeling guilt, or you don't feel guilt. And it will be somewhere between the two, depending on our level of recovery. You're coming out of codependence and your standards will go up. Wow, that's going to create turbulence interpersonally. Absolutely. That's going to create confrontation. People always say that to me when they're in recovery. They're like, I'm getting into more arguments with people. I'm like, well, you're probably demanding a bit more respect than you previously used to, because now you're present, as you just said, and you value yourself. Now, if you're a thing that has value and you're visible and you're present, you're not coming from the codependent false self, you're coming from your authentic self, you're not going to let somebody trample all over something that's valuable. That's not human nature.
You have nicely defined boundaries. And we can all get along unless you rub up against that, and then I'll just politely tell you to fuck off.
Well, that's where societies that have worked for a period of time and flourished, there would have been very explicit cultural means of doing conflict. My pet theory is where we see a lot of politeness, culturally, there's been a lot of individual violence. So British people are very polite. This was a warring nation. It was the very invaded. A lot of children born here were born the sons and daughters of invading warlords, and people carried weapons. So they were violent. So you could be killed brushing up somebody the wrong way in a tavern. So politeness becomes a thing. Look at the Japanese, walking around with a 3-foot-long razor blade at your hip that you can draw out in under a second. That makes people polite.
Yes, yes, it does. It does. One of the questions I like to ask my guests towards the end of the podcast is, and I've tweeted this recently since talking to Sam. So previously,
there's before Sam, and then there's after Sam.
Did you find that?
Yes.
Did you find that? It's not just me.
Yeah. No, I joke. I've joked with Sam about it, especially if I sit with Sam and I talk to him. It's like a couple of times I've sat with him and I've had a couple of drinks with him and like a 2 or 3 hour conversation. Yeah, it changes you. It does change you. It's very intense. It's a very intense experience. And it takes 2 or 3 days to sort of get over.
And there was something amazing about the fact that you can sit and talk to. And I didn't mean the podcast to become we've chatted to Sam reminiscing thing, but there's something very real about the fact that we all cruise around and meet codependents who brushed up against narcissistic behaviors and this, that, and the other, and they say, oh yeah, my ex-boyfriend or my ex-girlfriend or wife or is a narcissist and this, that, and the other, but that will never be acknowledged by the other person or recognized. But to actually meet somebody who right at the very start of a 2-hour conversation said, yeah, I've been diagnosed twice. This is me. This is it. And it's cool.
And I wouldn't want people to get confused and think that it's a good idea to be talking to narcissists generally. Sam is a unique. Well, that would feed his narcissistic sense of self. He is unique, but he actually is unique. And if I would say if people do get the chance to speak to him, they absolutely should. And if you're polite and nice, he will talk to you and he will help, which confuses people. They're like, well, why would he help you? I'm like, because he can, because he has the power to do that. That's people want to reduce this to like a child story, good and bad, black and white, angels and demons. It's not like that. It's unfortunately the world is not like that. But yes, absolutely. Your worldview will change after speaking to Sam, for sure.
Indeed. Anyway, so back to the final question. So previously I would ask people, if you could just upload a nugget of information into the collective consciousness, what would it be? But I've swapped it now to, if you could upload a question into the collective consciousness. So everyone just thought about, and everyone just thought about it quietly for 5 or 7 minutes. What would that be, Richard?
I'll give you a tricky answer. I would have them, if it was like this radio signal that just went out.
Yes.
And they had to do it for 5 or 6 minutes. I would have them ask themselves, why am I doing this right now? And the reason I say that's a tricky question, because if you do that for 5 or 6 minutes, you'll keep doing it because you'll learn so much. I think people just do. They just do habitually. And if you actually set 4, 5, or 6 minutes and say, why am I doing this now? Why am I in this marriage? Why am I in this job? Why am I going here? Why do I do this every day? Why am I doing this? Why am I doing this? Why am I doing this? It will echo, and they'll keep asking themselves that. And the world will become a more purposeful place. Right now, one of the things with codependency is you have people drifting, trying to live somebody else's dream, somebody else's story, somebody else's narrative, and they're purposeless. They have no intent. They're very, very limited on intent. And if you're asking yourself the opposite question is, why am I doing this? And you keep asking that, you end up finding an intent. You go, well, it's for this reason.
Superb. It's been an absolute pleasure talking to you.
Pleasure talking to you, sir.
Indeed. It's, for me, breath of fresh air.
Thank you. Thank you.
If people want to reach out and find you, you're all over YouTube, Instagram, all the platforms that induce these strange neuroses.
I'm there. I'm the counter-infection.
Counter-infection.
I'm the vaccine. I'm the vaccine out there.
Love it. Love it. You're the vaccine. But yes, you're all there. Just look for Richard Grannon and SpartanLife.com. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. It's been an absolute pleasure.